Alrighty, well, good afternoon and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Andrew Doffney. I'm the Instruction and Outreach Librarian at the New Jersey State Library. And it is my pleasure to present Regina Fitzpatrick, who is the library's genealogy librarian, who is going to wrap up our programming for National Family History Month today, talking about how you can find New Jersey land records online. So it's going to be chock full of information, and we're really excited to see what Regina has to offer. Before we jump into our presentation, I just have a few housekeeping items. We will be taking your questions, so please feel free to submit them at any time using the Q&A or the chat buttons in the Zoom dashboard. At the end of the webinar, there will be a survey available. So if you have time, we ask you please complete the survey. We really appreciate any and all feedback that you want to give us. And as we like to highlight, Regina has curated a fantastic genealogy research guide that talks about all things related to genealogy. So I encourage you all to look at that at your leisure. It's available 24/7. So please take a minute to look at that when you can. And I'll be sending a link to that out in the chat momentarily. And then one last thing, this is what your dashboard should look like if you're using a PC or a Mac. If you're using a mobile device, the dashboard may look a little bit different, but all the features will still be there. In the bottom left-hand corner, you can check your audio settings. So if you're using an external listening device, like a headset or earbuds, you can check to make sure it's connected properly there. At any point during the presentation, if you do have any issues, there is a raise hand button in the middle. You can click on that and that'll alert me. I will send you a message in Zoom and hopefully be able to resolve any problems that you are having. And then lastly, as I mentioned, if you do have questions, you can get in touch with us with the chat or the Q&A buttons, and we'll be happy to address them. So that is it for me. Regina, you can take it away when you're ready.
Excellent. Okay, I just started my timer to keep myself honest. And if everybody will give me just 1 second, I'm going to share my screen. I am also going to go off video because all my stuff is over here and I don't want to be looking over here, but I will be back on video for the Q&A portion. So give me just 1 minute and I will start sharing. Okay, I hope everybody can see okay. Welcome to Researching New Jersey Land Records. My name is Regina. I am the genealogy librarian here at the New Jersey State Library. I want to talk to you all about land records because I think that they are a surprising genealogical goldmine. And we're going to spend just a little bit of time in PowerPoint, and then we are going to go out online and look at a couple of resources. So before we even dive into our agenda, I want to talk about why I'm teaching a class on these today. Land records span a very long time. New Jersey is a very old political entity. We have records from the 17th century up to the present day. When someone is selling land, often the deed will contain details on why exactly they have the right to sell a land. So if they inherited land through a bequest and a will, the deed will explain that so that everybody knows legally free and clear this person is authorized to sell land. In addition, the deed may provide some specific dates. It may provide general dates, but it may help you narrow down dates when somebody died, somebody got married, even possibly the age of a child or around when somebody was born, because a deed may indicate, especially if somebody was inheriting land, they may have been a minor at the time that they inherited the right. And now that they are a fully grown adult, the deed may indicate that now they are authorized to make their own land transactions because they have reached their majority. In addition, other family members may be named if the property has been handed down over multiple generations. You may get kind of a genealogy of the family property as well. Wills will be quoted, which makes this really great, especially if you're using a will collection in tandem with the land records, and the will is difficult to read. Although the entire will may not be republished in the volume, you can still get a nice gist of what the will says. And then again, names and other clues, even the location, may help you when you are trying to go into other records collection that may give you some more exact dates. So that's why we like this. Just as an example, you'll see on the right of the screen, I have the Barker family tree. This tree was constructed from me reading the opening paragraph of the 1726 deed, where Mary Bullens was selling land on behalf of the family. Mary was the heir at law of her uncle, Samuel Barker. Her relatives, who were his direct descendants, were also in this deed giving up their rights to her to sell the land on the family's behalf. So this deed explained the terms of Samuel Barker's will and who everybody was. And thanks to that, I was able to construct a 3-generation family tree. It named certain family members who had died. In some cases of the grandchildren of Martha and Thomas Bowlby, I believe Jordan was the oldest son, and it specified that in the deed. So there are some really cool and useful information that you can get from a deed. It is often not to this particular level, but you may, especially if land is being sold that was inherited, you may get some kin and genealogical details. So that is why we are discussing this today. So what I plan to do is we're going to look at a few highlights of the two collections we'll be reviewing. And the two collections we are going to be reviewing today are the Early Land Records database on the State Archives website and the Family Search Digitized Images collection, which contains New Jersey County deed records. So those are what we are going to look at. Just a very brief aside, you'll see I have a map at the bottom. You will probably not find maps to this detail in the Early Land Records database. You will definitely not find them in the county deeds, but maps are an associated collection that may be useful as you are doing this research. If you do find ancestor information, you can see this is a really useful visualizer to see kind of where the property was, who the neighbors was, so on and so forth. The map that we are looking at here is of the Piscataway area, and it was done during the Revolutionary War by Lieutenant John Hills, who was an engineer and a soldier in George III's army who was over here. So he was making these maps for the benefit of the British Army and giving them ideas of, you know, the the uh, the land and potential theaters of battles and things like that while the British Army was in New Jersey fighting the Americans. So I did want to point this out as something useful. As you get further into the 19th century, you have things like real estate and plat maps that will show you property owners. Um, so if you are able, I highly recommend after you find a deed, also looking at maps just to see if you can get a little visualizer um, to help you understand where the property is. So with that, I just want to briefly talk about the Early Land Records database and the county deeds records before we actually go online and uh, use these items. We're probably going to spend a lot of time looking at the early land records because you'll be able to find the same kind of information in the county deeds collection, and I want to spend a little bit more time in family search going over the mechanics of how to find things, because the same kind of genealogical information is likely going to be available in those later records. So the early land records database includes several different collection. It's kind of an amalgamation. One of the major collections it includes are the deeds that were filed with the Secretary of State's office back in the day. So the most useful time period for genealogical research in this particular database is going to be from the 17th century up to about 1800, because that's when most of the Secretary of State's deeds appear. Deeds are going to be the records that contain the most genealogical information. When you are looking at survey books and other things, you may get drawings or illustrations of property, or descriptions of the meets and bounds. They will contain far less genealogical information, but that does not mean they are not useful to your research. So we like deeds, as I mentioned in our opening slide, because they often include years, at least the year of the transaction. They may mention other year, the year a will was proved, or the specific date a year was proved. It may mention the date, may give you a clue as to when a marriage or a death occurred, and it may help you determine even when somebody may have been born, especially if they inherited land as a minor. I have a link to the early land records database, but we are going to look at that in a minute. And you have options to either order records directly from the database or view certain records. We are also going to look at some land records that are available for in-person use only at the state archives, which I discovered today. Um, if I linked a document here called Using the Records of the East and West Jersey Proprietors. If your ancestor was here in the 17th century, it means they lived in a proprietary colony. The proprietary colonies of East and West New Jersey were governed directly by the East and West Jersey proprietors, which were corporations. They had permission from the crown to operate, but they controlled and managed the government. And they were incredibly powerful landowners, and they were they were both land corporations essentially. Um, the impact of the East and West Jersey proprietors does extend up into the 18th century. Very early in the 18th century, the East and West Jersey proprietors surrendered their governance of the colonies of East and West Jersey to the Crown. The Crown then combined the two colonies into a single royal colony with an appointed royal government, a royal governor. So that meant the government was then directly run by the British Crown. So that started in 1702. However, the East and West Jersey proprietors did not cease to exist. They were still corporations. They were just no longer running the governments of East and West Jersey. And they continued to conduct land transaction. The East Jersey proprietors only folded as a corporation or dissolved in the late 1990s. And guess what? West Jersey proprietors still exist. They are still in operation and they still own some land. So that is pretty cool. So their impact does definitely continue into the 18th century and even beyond. That's why you'll see the early land records database does extend up into the 20th century because the two corporations were still in existence. So even if your ancestor did not live here during the proprietary period, the document I referenced below may still be useful just for context and understanding. The early land records database kind of flows very neatly into the county deeds records. These records were kept by the counties, uh, starting from the establishment of the county governments in the 1790s. I mentioned the county wills in this slide because you can use these two records collections in tandem. The county wills, so let me back up a minute. Every county has two offices, the county clerks and the county surrogates. The county surrogates handles anything to do with estates. And then the county clerk's office handles an amalgamation of other records, including deeds. This will become relevant when you start looking at these digitized image collections on Family Search, because you need to use different selections in the menu to switch back and forth between wills and deed records. But both for this time period from about the 1790s, or when your county was founded, up until about 1900-ish, are going to be digitized and available via Family Search. So the most important thing about these records collection to note is that, unlike the early land records, these records are not searchable by name. Essentially, you're being given a digital roll of microfilm and you have to go through it. The easiest place to start is with grantor grantee indexes. Um, the grantor, again, is the person who is selling the land. This is where I would start looking for your ancestor, because again, these deeds will explain why the person has the right to sell the land if they have inherited it or were gifted it or something like that. The provisions by which they acquired this land will be explained to you. Again, the continuation of the same information is available. So we're going to be focused on mechanics when we look at this collection. How do I get to things? How do I find things? What are some useful tips and tricks? So we will go over that. Whereas in the early land records database, we're going to be looking um, at far more examples of genealogical records and a few little mechanical things as well. Um, the final thing to note, and I will remind you of this when we go and we look at the Family Search records, is that they essentially copied microfilm. So if the microfilmed indexes went up to a certain year, they would just copy the whole thing. So I mentioned that the deed records themselves usually in general go up to about 1900, maybe a little bit beyond, but not too far into the 20th century. You may have an index to the deeds, a grantor or a grantee index that covers up to like the 1970s. Those records, those actual deed records, will not be digitized on Family Search. You will have to go to the county clerk's office to get those records. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. I can restate that when we get to the Q&A, and I will be reminding you of that when we look at our example in the image search on Family Search. Okay. So at this point, I am going to stop sharing my screen, and please give me just 1 minute. And I am going to share. And where is my... here we go. Okay. You're going to share this. Oh, whoops. Hold on just 1 second. I'm minimizing this and I'm pulling up my other screen. Hey, Andrew, can you see the early land records, or are you seeing Family
Family
Search?
Search.
Okay, hold on. Let me unshare and then reshare this screen. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now can you see early land records?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you. Okay. So I want to start us off with the early land records database. We are going to be spending a lot of time here because I'm going to be going over most of the genealogical examples here. The early land records database I mentioned is a mixture of the East and West Jersey, some of the East and West Jersey proprietors' records, plus the Secretary of State's deeds. You're going to find a lot of genealogical information in those Secretary of State's deeds. You can see at the top of the interface is a description of the of the I'm sorry, everybody. Give me just 1 second. Of the database, there is also guidance to additional East and West Jersey proprietor records, and there's a document called Using the Records of the East and West Jersey Proprietors. So this particular document um, is a is really useful for understanding context for how the East and West Jersey proprietors worked. But relevant to us, as you are using this particular resource, there are two glossaries in here. One explains some key terms used and the various document types that you are going to find in this resource. And then the second one gives you a list of kind of older terms and some of the legal terms to help you understand what is being said in the deed that you are looking at. So that again is linked right here. And if you are doing some serious or significant work within this database, I highly recommend having this PDF open so that you can refer to the two glossaries as you are working. In addition, there are also instructions on how you can use the search fields and how to place an order. So the search fields, you have all different kinds of fields you can use. I like very much just to put in a very basic search um, and go from there. But then if I get tons of results, I may want to filter using the various fields. You can see that you can put in a year span if you know the time period that somebody lived. If you have a citation from somewhere else and you know a book number that you're looking for, you can put the book number in directly. If you know somebody's ethnicity, like if you're doing Black American research, you can select African American from this drop-down menu, for example. And if you know where somebody lived or a specific location that you're interested in, you can put those in as well. So I'm just going to do a basic example here. I'm going to search the surname Bass. Those of you who know me know that I've been working on the genealogy of Governor Jeremiah Bass's family for a really long time. Um, Bass was a proprietary governor of both East and West New Jersey in the late 17th century. He was also a real estate agent and owned a whole bunch of property. His family, after his death in 1725, was able to sell off pieces of his land for years and years and years um, in order to support themselves and his grandchildren and even his great grandchildren were able to do the same. So his impact can be felt through his family up through the 19th century. But you can see we have a variety of other last names here. And we are just going to click search. By the way, I got into researching the Bass family because of this database, because I saw two of his daughters um, buying land together or selling land together. And I was like, why are these two women with different last names selling land? And so I went to look at one of these deeds, and sure enough, it describes, that they are the heirs at law to their father, Jeremiah Bass. And his will was quoted to explain why they had the right to sell the land. We saw an example of the in the PowerPoint presentation of a Bass deed. So when I do a basic search on Bass, if I scroll down, you can see I get a number of results. I have some options. This particular record is digitized. So if I click View PDF, I can go in here and I can see the handwritten original document associated and read the whole text. I can also download this item and it's on my computer forever. I can also look at it in browser, zoom in, zoom out, so on, so forth, etc., etc. It is mine free and clear. I can do with it as I wish. If something is not digitized, I can select it and add it to my shopping cart, and I can purchase this record from the New Jersey State Archives online. If I scroll down, I can see my shopping cart, the item in my shopping cart, the cost, and when I'm ready to check out, I can order the copy. I can also remove it if I decide that I do not want it. Also, I found this today. There are certain older county books that have some older deeds in them. These are the property of the county clerk's office. They are not part of those county records necessarily that are digitized on Family Search. However, they are available for in-person use at the state archives. They have them on microfilms, so you can go in and look at it there. There may also be a copy of this particular deed in one of the deed books from the Secretary of State's office. So what I might do is I might pay attention to the indexed party and then who is purchasing the land and who is selling the land. This is Ann Pigeon, Catherine Pierce, selling land to John Haight together. So I could then take this information, go up to the search field, put in Ann Pigeon or Catherine Pierce in here, or John Haight, put in the year 1762 to 1762, and see if I could find another copy within this index. So I do want to point that out. That's an option, but the archives has instructions here. You can contact the Burlington County Clerk if you would like to order this record. If you don't have the ability to go to the state archives to research this in person, you can definitely do that. Okay, so that is just kind of a basic search and some of the things that you can do. And I'm sorry, I'm just reading my notes to make sure that I know what I'm doing next. So regarding um, regarding the descriptions here. So the early land records was indexed by state archives staff. And when I worked over at the state archives, this was a project that I worked on. And you can see it's not only an index, there's a brief description with pertinent details in here. The goal is to make this database as useful as possible to researchers. So the the archive staff is providing additional information, so you can be very, very sure that this that the deed you're looking at might be relevant to your research. And I just want to show you an example of an entry that is not digitized, but is highly detailed, and you can pull a lot of information from. And so we have Ennis Jagels, who's the daughter of Elizabeth Pierce, no relation to Catherine Pierce, who is a Bass. But Ennis Jagels is the daughter of Elizabeth Pierce, who was the daughter of George Hutchinson. And Ennis is selling land as a descendant of her mother through provisions in her grandfather's will. You can see Elizabeth Pierce was eventually widowed, remarried a man named Nathaniel Morey, and her maiden name is Ennis Morey. It also names all of her sisters and her brothers as well. And I'm trying to see if I can't remember if this names the other kids who were named in George Hutchinson will or not, but it's quite detailed. There are many parties here. In addition, there is a land description. Um, and I'm sorry, I'm just reading to see if I can find one of the kids who is not Elizabeth Pierce. Or if it's stuck to the Maury line. I think it looks like to me, just from trying to skim, it did stick to the Maury line. But from this particular abstract, we have the exact date of George Hutchinson's will. We know who his daughter was. And so this is an example of how we can use in tandem another collection to learn more information. So George Hutchinson, because his will is dated in 1698, is represented in the series of published books called the Calendar of New Jersey Wills that are filed again at the Secretary of State's office. And George Hutchinson is one of the people who is included in this published series of books. These books were written in the early 20th century, so they are out of copyright law. They're online and digitized. So we can read an abstract of George's will. And where is Elizabeth Pierce? There she is. And we can see that one of the children is indeed his daughter Elizabeth. This abstract, even though the abstract over here does not name any of Elizabeth's siblings, they are named for us here, and we can now order the will from over at the state archives if we would like to see the entire will and get a better sense of what rights were granted to Elizabeth. We can also order this record because likely the provisions of George Hutchinson's will are laid out here and what he granted to each of his children, and then what they in turn were able to pass on, what rights they in turn were able to pass on to their grandchildren. So I wanted to show you this because it's incredibly detailed, incredibly useful. You can get a lot of information just from the descriptions, and you can even, using the descriptions, connect to other collections, even if you don't have access to the full text of the deed. Okay. And then our next example we are going to look at has less to do with genealogy, although it is a genealogical deed, and more about mechanics. We're going to be looking at a deed specifically because of the handwriting. And I just want to give you a few tips and tricks on how to approach reading this handwriting. I know it is incredibly exciting to be able to, see and look at a deed, but what do you do when you click on it and you're confronted with handwriting that looks like this? I'm going to zoom in here and just give you a few tips and tricks. So this deed is between Peter Sunmans, who is the son and heir of Arndt Sunmans. And Arndt, we know from this deed, is formerly of the Kingdom of Holland. So that does give us some useful genealogical details. But how are we supposed to find those useful genealogical details when we can't even read this chicken scratch that we see before us here? So my advice is when you are faced with a document like this, first of all, zoom in real good. And then in the first line, see if you can find a proper noun. I hope you can see my mouse right now. I'm circling the phrase East New Jersey. And as I am looking at this, I'm looking at the way the letters are shaped. I can see the A's and the E's, the A in East and the E in New Jersey and in, well, I guess in the word new and then the word Jersey look remarkably similar. But we can see that the A connects off to the side, whereas the E is kind of shaped like an O, like we would expect an O to be. Also, if we look at the word Jersey, we can see the letter R looks like a V. I'm going to go back to the beginning so that we can apply this to the word proprietors, which you see. Also, just one more thing, in the word east, the T in east is not crossed, but it is in proprietors. So I just wanted to point that out. And the word proprietors, again, gives us an O. So we know how that letter looks compared to our E, which looks very similar to a cursive O. Also, we've got our R's that look kind of like V's as well. We can see that he dots his I's, and that the A, we get a much better illustration of the letter A and the connector there. So as we are scrolling through, we can look to these large, clear words that are easy to read and apply them to smaller, more difficult words to read. Like if we look at proprietor and we look at this word here, we know to look for the R that looks like a V. We know that the E's look like O's, so you can probably figure out pretty easily that this word is greeting. Another interesting quirk in 17th century handwriting is the lowercase v is sometimes jetted up, so it looks more like a B. So this looks like hab instead of have, but it's have. And you can apply that as you're looking down further. The word river here, we can tell that this is a V because this is similar to the have in the beginning. And so, as you are scrolling down through this deed and attempting to read the text, I would attempt in one line to find a phrase like County of Essex, something that's written very largely and clearly. Look at the handwriting there, and then apply it to the next few lines below. Apply it to the words around it as well, and then you get a whole range of letters that you can potentially read. I would advise taking this line by line. Um, I find that reading words aloud sometimes helps figure out what they are. You can kind of guess by context, and that may help you suffer through something like this. So I wanted to mention those nice mechanical functions in here. And then the final thing that I would like to look at in the early land records are some different kinds of documents that can still give you genealogical information. So let me clear this. And we're going to look at two examples, well, three. I'm saving the best example for last because I just discovered it this morning and it blew my mind. I was really excited. Um, so let me search this. There are a few sub-collections within this early land records collections that are really interesting. One of the things that they decided to include in the early land records were manumissions. You can see the results down below, and you can get the digitized copies. You can see that the 18th century cursive, you may have to zoom in a little, but it's much easier to read than the 17th century chicken scratch. Um, Also, there are some cool things like servant importation lists. These apply to both indentured servants, people who are called servants, but who also may be enslaved, such as our second example here from 1684. Also, brace yourself when we see this handwriting, because, oh boy, I want to like back out of here slowly looking for this. But again, when we zoom in and focus on the list, we can kind of see certain things. Like the first person on the list is Rebecca Laurie, who's the daughter of Gowan Laurie, who is importing all of these servants. We can see that the R's here look like they're kind of diagonal. Although the Robert below Rebecca looks a little bit straighter, we can see the E's are kind of the same to our other example we looked at. And then the C's look like R's, which is really interesting. And also this clerk may write his A's open, so they look more like a lowercase u, and then we can apply that. We can see also that this particular clerk does horizontal slashes for the tails of longer letters. He folds the top parts of the letters over the lower part, and he also bends uh, certain extended letters like a lowercase t as well. So I wanted to point this out. This is a different document type than a deed, but you can get additional genealogical information about your ancestor. This may be of particular interest if you are researching a 17th century ancestor who came over who came over here as an indentured servant. So I did want to point that out as well. Um, And then finally, what I want to show you is an example of finding a marriage. I think it's 1683. It might be 1682. Give me just 1 second to check my work. No, it is 1682. No. All right. We're going to do this way because I know what I am looking for. Okay. And let's go. Why aren't you coming up, John Barry? You should be. If I can't get this, I'll pull up my screenshot of the record. I wonder if this is just because I've been in here so long, it's just kind of crapping out on me. So let me go back in and start this fresh. Search. There we go. Okay. So John Barry was the father of Richard Barry, who married Nedemia Sanford, who is the daughter of William Sanford. We know they're engaged sometime in June of 1682. They do get married and have a child because Richard and Nedemia are selling land together as husband and wife in 1695. You'll notice there are two very interesting things here. One is that Nedemia's dad is assigning her a slave in anticipation of her marriage. He's actually assigning her two slaves, a married couple. And we can see the witnesses there. We can guess from these other assignments or land transactions that these were likely also in consideration of the upcoming marriage. We have a transaction that occurred between father and son on June 13th. And then we have another one on June 30th of 1682. Okay, and here we are. The deed between John and Francina Berry to their son Richard is on this page. You can see we have our awful 17th century chicken scratch. Unfortunately, this deed does not explicitly mention the marriage. However, and I just discovered this today, I want to scroll up a little bit. This is both an example of marriage records, evidence of a marriage record, and also a non-land record that points to a marriage date, and in fact gives us an exact marriage date. What we are looking at is a release of marriage, so a divorce essentially. And I have never seen a record like this before. And this makes me so excited. And I had looked at it and I was like, oh, yeah, this is cool. It has a marriage date. But then I actually read the document and here they are getting a divorce. So there is a literal divorce in this book, which is really cool. Thomas Davis and his wife, Margaret Blue, got married on the island of Barbados, I believe, at St. Peter's Parish. And they got married on October 2nd, 1673. They are divorcing nearly 10 years later, August 24th, 1683. Um, and this particular document, where's my quote that I want to read you? Do, 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 do. Giving her, the said Margaret, full power and liberty to dispose of herself as she shall oh, what does this word say? I thought it said as she shall so see fit, but I'm not quite sure if that's right. I would need to zoom in on the chicken scratch and look at some of the other words above to see if I can make sure that is correct. I think it is see fit. The last word is fit, but I'm not sure what this word here is. So interesting document, very cool. Again, I've never seen anything like this, and it's really neat that it's digitized for us to enjoy. If you would like to read an abstract of this, William Nelson has a book on early land records where he went through the Secretary of State's deeds, the very, very early ones, and basically transcribed, partially transcribed or abstracted some of them. This book was written out of copyright. It's available online. Both we at the State Library and the State Archives also have copies. Okay, so that is all I have for the early land records. Again, I'm going to stop sharing and then reshare my screen. The family search
We have a couple
portion.
questions related to the land records database that
Okay,
I think would be important to address.
okay.
One is it important to try all the misspellings of a name in the database, or is that kind of captured already?
No. And that's something we were going to talk about in a minute when I show you less keys and
Okay.
other types of keys.
Okay. And then the other one was related to they have an older house is about 200 years old, and they want to research the types of crops that were grown and confirm family names, maps, and history. Would the early land records database help them?
Types of crops. What were the other two things?
Um, Family names, maps, and history.
Maps is not going to help you in early land records. There might be a, if you're lucky, you might get a survey map of the property, but that will just be the property and it will only be like the meets and bounds of the property. They're surveying like, boundary lines and things like that. And it's not guaranteed that there will be one. Um, Crops, probably not. Usually deeds will say kind of, especially early deeds have kind of boilerplate language for certain features of a property. And so there will be kind of a generic description. It will say something like, I'm quit claiming my rights to all rivers, streams, buildings, cattle, this, that, the other thing that's in it. But it's very boilerplate and it applies to everyone. You can't necessarily guarantee that those particular crops were grown by a particular family or they were on there. If in fact crops are even mentioned in that little boilerplate description. So crops, maps,
Then it was family names and the history.
family names. Yes, you will get family names if we are talking about inherited land. So if someone got a piece of land through a will, or someone is identifying themselves as the parent of someone, as we saw in some of our last examples, where John and Francina are giving their son Richard slaves and they're giving him land, that William Sanford, who's Nadimia's dad, is giving her slaves specifically because she's getting married, and he's expressing that relationship, that he is her father and is giving her this gift because of her marriage. That will be in there. If someone is inheriting the right to property in a will, then yes, names may be included. Remember, as we saw in that Mooney abstract that we look at, that particular abstract did not name all of George Hutchinson's children. It only named Elizabeth Mooney's children. She was the daughter of George, and so it listed her descendants and what she inherited certain rights in the will from her father, and then she passed those rights along to her children, and that will all be explained in a deed. So you will get family members and relevant family members to that particular land transaction. So that's something to be aware of. The will be abstracted or quoted or transcribed as it relates to the person who is selling that land and as it relates to the particular piece of land that is being sold, because it is describing why the person has the right to that land. And that carries over to the county deeds as well. So want to make that very clear. So I hope that helps to clarify that. If you have any additional questions, please do email me and I can give you some more specific guidance advice, and I can see if I can find the boilerplate quote as to what, somebody is giving up their rights to on the property.
That was all for that specific database.
Okay. Okay. And then I'm going to share family search. Okay. Here we are on family search. I'm going to try to go through this real fast. On family search, again, we have these digitized records that are not indexed by name. They are browsable, not searchable. So if you go into records and you do a name search on your ancestor, these deed records that I'm talking to you about today are not going to appear. You must go and look them up, treat them like you're looking at a microfilm collection, because that's essentially what they are. They're just microfilm on your computer. You must go to the images search in order to do this. So I have our specific example. And again, I'm going to emphasize the same kind of genealogical information from the deeds that you would find in the early land records. It's going to be the same kind of thing here. So we're not going over genealogical examples in this part. Remember too, these county deeds are held by the county clerks and the county clerk's office. So if you are looking for county records, when you go to search for a place, you're going to search for the county, not the town the person came from within that county. So it's a county record, search for the county here. Search. And then you can see what will happen when you search for the county is it's going to give you a complete list of all the records related to the county that they have. We want to filter this down. We are just looking for deeds here. And you can do that by using the life event filter over here. And you can see they have different subjects. You will note that if you search for a different county other than Mercer County, these categories might be slightly different. But I know in this case, the deeds and my indexes that I want are under property. And then this will give you further things that you can narrow by. So what we are going to do is we are going to look at the deed index. Remember I said to start here. The individual deed volumes are indexed, but you have to dig through them, to find your individual ancestor. And I would rather look at one alphabetical index and find all the places where my ancestor is indexed than have to go through all 171 deed volumes and look at 171 indexes to try to find my ancestor. So that's why I recommend starting with the deed indexes. And there we go. And here is our example. We are going to look at a particular example. We are looking for a woman named Elizabeth Doyle in this case. You can see when we click on the image, it looks just like a roll of microfilm. This will give us the title page. It will tell us what years we have here. And will get us introduced and make sure that we are in the right place. So we definitely want to look for an Elizabeth Doyle, so surname D, who is selling land. And it's important to note the given names A to Z because in this particular volume, we are looking at a particular type of index. Now, in the early land records, names are not grouped together. So all of the different spellings of Pierce, say, are not nicely grouped together. This became more of a concern in the 19th and especially in the 20th century, when indexers would try to organize groups of last names that were similarly spelled together. So you would get as many potential spellings of a name in one place as possible. Family Search has a really helpful guide to the various alphabetical systems as part of the Family Search Wiki. What we are looking at on our other screen is something called a Russell Key Index. So how the Russell Index works is we first go to a given name initial. So we know we're looking for a woman named Elizabeth Doyle. Okay. And then when we spell the surname, these names are grouped together based on certain significant consonants, L, M, N, R, T. So we're going to spell D-O-Y-L. L is the first letter that comes up in the surname Doyle. So we know that when we look for Elizabeth, she's going to be on page 51. Again, we know this because L is the first letter, D-O-Y-L, and then we can go. Unfortunately, all of these volumes in Mercer County are going to be indexed the same. So they are going to use this particular Russell index, but the particular indexing systems used between different counties might vary. So that's where this guide can really help you and provide you with a little bit of instruction on how to use these particular indexes. So again, these indexes are also great because they are going to group uh, different potential spelling variations together, whereas the early land records is not going to do that for you. Okay, and I want image 95. You can tell that I've cheated. I have a specific example in mind, so I know exactly where to go. So we have our Elizabeth Doyle here, and she is selling land to Elizabeth F. Hutchinson. And we know there's at least one other party because she has an et al. Abbreviation next to her. So Elizabeth Doyle is not only selling to this person, she's probably selling to at least one other person. So that is useful for us to know. We have the citation. This is going to be in volume 147, page 196. And there's a second land transaction between the same parties on the following page. Both have the same date, and both of these transactions occurred in Ewing, New Jersey. I just want to note very quickly, if you see the abbreviation UX in either this database or the early land records database, UX is an abbreviation for the Latin et uxor, which means and wife. So Eldridge Dale's wife is not listed in this particular transaction here, but she will be listed by name in the deed as one of the parties selling. If you know who a woman married and you see that she is not indexed, but her husband is, and she is reduced to an abbreviation, don't be discouraged. Still check that deed because the deed may have more to do with her family than his. It could be that it is simply a husband and wife selling land together, giving land to their children together, etc. But he may just be on there because he's married to her and, really it has to do with her family and her inheritance. So I wanted to point that out quickly. But we are going to volume 147 and we are going to look at these two records transactions. So in order to get to the actual deed books, we are going to go away from the deed index and go into the deeds. You can see that some of the volumes are listed here. I already know where this particular volume is, so we are going to go right to it. And here it is. You will note that both volume 146 and 147 are on this roll of microfilm, and we want volume 147. So just very quickly, we see that our opening item is volume 146. So this is your reminder that you have a whole volume to go through before you get to 147. If I just automatically go to page 196, and what is my image number? Image 146. We can see that this is page 196, but when we zoom in, we're in the middle of one deed, and this deed down here, although it's very faint, has nothing to do with Elizabeth Doyle, and that's because we're in volume 146. So if you go to a page, it does not match what is in the index, and you know that you have multiple volumes in a single reel that you're looking at online, Just remember to go to the first volume, and how you find that is when you look at the microfilm film strip, and again, I'm cheating, you'll probably be in here and you'll scroll up and down. You'll probably see the end of the previous volume, the cover. And then when you go in, this will confirm that you are in volume 147. And once you are in the correct volume, then you can go to the correct page number. And our correct page number is image 488. Okay. So here is the Elizabeth Doyle deed. Again, you can download this. It will save it as an image. Unfortunately, unlike the early land records database, when they digitize, they do the complete document. You will have to flip through page by page and digitize each individual page. So I just wanted to warn you about that. But here is our Elizabeth Doyle to Elizabeth F. Hutchinson. We are going to really zoom in on this because the pen is so faint, but we can see this is pretty boilerplate. It's very easy to read. This is not like reading our beautiful 17th century handwriting. It has the same elements that the other deeds do. It has a description of the property. Um, it tells us how much she's paying for it. This has nothing to do with genealogy, just to be clear. But it it looks like it looks remarkably similar to the land records that you will see in the early land records database. And the deeds that do have genealogical information will likely contain lots of the same information. Um, we can see that the other party in the deed is Henry B. Hunt. And then if we go to the very end, which is on page 196, we can see that Elizabeth Doyle signs with a mark. And then her second deed with these two parties is down below, and we would just need to flip a page if we wanted the end of this particular deed. And this page would need to be downloaded separately if we wanted both to save both transactions. So that is all I have for you. I hope this helped. Again, we went over a lot of mechanical stuff in this because I feel that the family search image collections are a little bit more complicated to navigate rather than talking about, the genealogical information. But just know you can find the same kind of examples within these this deed collection as you can in the other one. So I am going to turn on my camera at this point, and if there are any questions, I am happy to answer them.
All right, thank you so much, Regina. If anybody does have questions, you can put them in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll be happy to address them. Can you repeat what is handled by the county clerk versus the county surrogate office? I think I have it correct, but could you just...
Yep. So the county clerks has a variety of different records, and they include the deed records. And those, again, start in, depending on when your county was founded, it will start from the county founding date. For older counties that predated New Jersey as a state, these generally start in the 1790s, very early 1790s, maybe even late 1780s. So there may be some overlap with the early land records depending on the county you're talking about. Um, So the county deeds collection is what we focused on today. In addition, the county clerk has mortgages. They have other types of property records. They have some voting records. If your ancestor was a tavern owner, they have tavern licenses. They are also the clerk of the court. They're not only the county clerk, but they are also the clerk of the county court. So they also have county court records as well in their collection, and naturalizations as well, because these were generally handled through the Court of Common Pleas of that particular county. So that is the county clerks. The surrogate, unlike the clerk, has one job and one job only, and the county surrogates deals with any and all estate matters. So those include estate papers such as wills, anything related to an estate and executors, guardianships, things like that. And I don't mean guardianships in terms of like physical custody of a child. I mean guardianships in terms of a legal representative who is meant to represent somebody's interests while they are a child that they inherited from somebody until they reach their adulthood. So if you are looking for anything to do with an estate, you're going to want county surrogates records. If you are looking for other record types that may have been held at the county level, those will be through the county clerk's office. That's where to check. I hope that helps.
All right. If a couple did not own land, what other records could place them in a county in New Jersey?
If you can find a marriage record for them, that would probably confirm their residence. Um, and then other records depend on the time period. Like if we're into the 19th century, then we can do census research and try to find them that way, because that would confirm residence. If they did not own property, but they had other, you know, items of value and they were relatively wealthy, they may still have an estate that you could confirm where they live. Um, You could look if you can confirm where the family was from and it's earlier. You could also check church records to see if the family went to a particular church, if they're listed on the membership registry. Um, Let me see what else. Maybe if somebody went into military service, that would confirm their residence as well. Also, if somebody came into the country in the 1790s and later and they naturalized, the naturalization record would confirm where the husband was a resident of. And I say husband because if we're talking 19th century, women did not have the right to vote yet, so they did not go through the citizenship process by themselves. They derived citizenship from their husband. So if she is a foreigner and he is a foreigner, then she's getting citizenship through his naturalization process.
Alrighty. Let's see. If the county clerk cannot locate land records, would the township have access to those?
No, unfortunately not. I don't believe townships keep them. Now, somebody may have donated an original copy of a deed that, the private citizen who owned the property had. Um, they may donate it to a local repository like a historical society or something like that. So it may be worth reaching out to the historical society where the person lived to see if anybody donated an original copy of the deed that would not have been recorded by the county or the state, but would have been kept by the individual for their records.
Um, how do you find the land record on a map? Where would you find the map?
Oh, you wouldn't find the land record on the map. You would find the person as a property owner. So if you found a deed and you know that Jeremiah Bass owns a house bordering the Delaware River in Burlington City, if I found a property map of, 1680s Burlington and J. Bass was listed, I would guess that that was his property that he owned in Burlington City if it bordered the Delaware River. And I would be able to look at that map then and see all of his neighbors. There are no map collections, as far as I know, that are related to the Secretary of State's deed books or the county deed books. They're completely separate. They're done separately. Those real estate or plat maps have no connection to the deeds that are filed at the county clerk's office. But if you know your ancestor owned property at a particular time and you find evidence of that, um, you can look for a map at the same time that does show property owners and see if you can find your ancestor listed on that particular map. And then you can kind of see in context where his property was, who the neighbors were, um, and maybe how large of a property he owned in comparison to others. Was he a pretty prominent landowner in that area? Did he have a large amount of acreage, things like that? So that's kind of neat in context to see side by side. So I do encourage you in tandem with looking at the land records to then go and depending on your time period, like I said, you could look at a plat map or a real estate map. If we're well into the 19th century or even into the 20th century, you could also look at a city directory listing to see where the property was, what the street address of a property was, and just kind of see what was around, what kind of neighborhood somebody lived in, things of that nature.
This goes back to the farmhouse question. So the best bet would be to start with a possible farm owner's name in the land deed, um, or in the early land records. And then is there a way to search by how the land was called, such as West Acres or anything like that?
Give me just 1 minute. Let me look at the I'm going into the early land records database and I want to look at the search fields. No. So you won't be able to search by like if we're talking about Lewis Morris's property of Morrisana or something like that. There's no way to search by that. You have the ability to search by county and by a location. So if you know the property was in a particular town, like Joseph Bonaparte's property of Point Breeze was in Bordentown, New Jersey, I might be able to, in the early land records, put in Bordentown and and try to find it that way.
Are surrogate records available online like the clerk's records are?
The county court circuits.
The surrogate.
Oh, the surrogate. I'm sorry. I thought you said circuit, Andrew. Yes. So remember I said there are all different types of documents that and that Family Search worked with both the county clerks and the county surrogates offices to digitize their records. So yes, the county surrogates office records are digitized on Family Search. So if you go into, oops, give me 1 minute. Let me go back. And you can still see my screen, right, Andrew?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. So under life event here, we have property because we were specifically looking at deeds. But let's see, we got residence property, we got death here. And I think legal. Yes. Okay. So in this case, like there might, depending on what county you're looking at, remember I said that these categories here were slightly different for every county. Some of them just might outright in that larger list have something that says estate or probate records. In the case of Morris County, or Mercer County, you have to go into legal and then you can select probate records, you can select wills, any of these other things that are particularly of interest for you. And no, I do not also want to see also mortgages. Thank you very much. So when I update this, you can see I get a list of records that I can look at. And within these records, there are also a collection of wills, um, which seem to date from the late 19th century. There may be other wills mixed in with oh, here we go. So here are more wills. So they're all kind of intermixed. There's one page of results here. And there are also probate records. It's not specifying what exactly that means, if it might also include some wills. So we could look at this and see if these particular probate records do include wills. Most of these volumes, just to reassure you, are probably going to have individual indexes. Some counties will have, like I mentioned for the deeds, they have the grantor grantee. Some county surrogates do have an overall index that they have digitized, so you can go to that as well, and check one index rather than several volumes. Although in the case of the wills, it seems to be divided up. I'm guessing, no, this is the volume number, so never mind that. So you would have to go in and check the index individually. So I hope that helps. We're just looking at one example here. So other counties may be slightly different and may have slightly different volumes than what you see for Mercer. So don't expect uniformity as you're navigating between the various counties.
Alrighty. I don't see any other questions, so I think we can go ahead and end it there. Anything you want to close with, Regina?
Yes, everybody, I know this is a little bit of a complex subject. If you do have any questions for me that require a little bit of research or, just some written instructions, please feel free to reach out to me. Please also let me know if you find anything cool, like the random divorce I discovered this morning in the early records. And I'm happy to pass that along to Vivian Thiel over at the State Archives, who is responsible for overseeing the data entry in the early land records database. The more cool stuff that we find that we get indexed on there, the better that the database will be, and I'm sure I would certainly appreciate to know when you find cool stuff, and I'm sure the archives would, in addition. So thank you. I hope this helped, and please feel free to reach out and let me know how using land records has assisted you in finding out family information.
All right. Thank you so much, Regina, and thank you everybody for attending today. I hope you have a wonderful day and this helps you in your research. I'd like to close with everybody be safe, be well, and hopefully we'll see you soon.